welcome to Training Tuesday. It is another Training Tuesday, and tonight is episode 4 in our Playing Nice in the Sandbox series. And I think episode 4 is going to be our final episode in this little mini series. If we come up with a topic 5 tonight, then that's great. I will add it. We'll do one more next week. Otherwise, we might flip topics next week. So we'll see how tonight goes. But tonight's episode 4 of Playing Nice in the Sandbox, the series is called Mastering Office Politics with Grace and Grit. Tonight's particular episode is Mastering Office Bullies with Grace and Grit. And it makes me a little bit sad that this has been such a popular topic. As I mentioned before, I've done trainings in the past on office bullies, and I will share those trainings with you guys also. But the fact that it's a recurring theme, and I went and looked at statistics, and they have not changed for the better since the last time I reported statistics, which was just last year. So the fact that we're dealing with people behaving badly does make me kind of sad. And hey, Anna, how are you? Happy Halloween. I know, and isn't it funny that like tonight, Halloween night, we're going to talk about bullies, people behaving badly, people dressing badly. So for those of you not out trick-or-treating or handling little ones trick-or-treating, thank you for joining me tonight. And if you are and watching this in the replay, say hello anyway. So maybe it's November by the time you see this, and that is okay. I did 2 earlier trainings, and earlier is in the last year and a half on bullies. One of them is dealing with bullies kind of in general. It's a longer training. So if that is one that you are interested in getting your hands on, it's just called Dealing with Bullies, and drop the word dealing for dealing with bullies in the chat, and I'll make sure you get a copy of that training. And then I did a second training that was specific to women as bullies. It's called Queen Bees, Women Bullying Women. Because when you do look at the statistics around bullying, while more men bully at work than women bully other women at a much higher rate than men bully women. So I did do a training focused on women who bully other women, and write bees, the word bees, in the chat if you'd like that training. So if you want the general kind of in-depth training on dealing with bullies, drop the word deal in the chat. And if you want, and I'll repeat this later too, and if you want the training specifically about dealing with women who are bullies, drop the word bee in the chat. And hello, Rochelle, I'm glad you could make it. So as we get started tonight, I promised tonight to answer questions, and I've had a few questions come in over the last few weeks as I've been doing this Playing Nice in the Sandbox Office Politics series, which is how I came to realizing that we should do another training on bullies. I actually had a client of mine reach out and say, you really should cover this. And that's what had me kind of going back and looking at, okay, what have I already done in the past about this, so we're not too repetitive here, and what can I add that's new? And that's where I thought, let's address some questions, right? Let's get some questions answered and see what we can do to help broaden our education, but also give us some perspective on this. So, hey, Sue, you got a deal? I will send it to you. And hey, Terry, good to see you as well. And happy Halloween. I should have dressed. I should have thought of that. Halloween is not my holiday. Like I don't mind Halloween, but like my daughter is a big fan of Halloween. She hand makes her costume every year and all that. That's not me. I don't do that. So I don't have a costume. I'm going to a party next weekend that requires a costume, but it's not ready yet. So I'm sorry. But happy Halloween for those of you who are celebrating. And like I said, if you're out trick-or-treating or came back from trick-or-treating, share the candy, please. And Anna, I see your comment there. You are correct. Bullying is never good, but when you feel you're being bullied by your staff, it's even worse. And so we should talk about that in context of power. because I'm gonna give you a definition of bullying, but I first want to give you a definition of what bullying is not. Because I think sometimes we simply conflate people's bad behavior with the concept of bullying, when it really is just people behaving very badly. So when somebody at work is making rude comments, even making sort of demeaning comments, right? Talking to you in a way that's disrespectful, talking in a way that it's meant to upset you, right? It's not nice, it's rude, all of those things, that doesn't necessarily make it bullying. Just because somebody's being mean, just because somebody's being passive aggressive and not very nice, doesn't actually make it bullying. It does make them mean and rude and not a very nice person, but bullying is more than that. So I want us to have, there's two distinguishing parts to this. One is what is bullying, and the other is how do we respond. Because when somebody's not actually bullying you, and they're just being a rude, mean person, your best defense to just rude, mean people, 100% genuine. I know you all know what I'm going to say. Your best defense is ignore them. Your best defense when somebody is simply being rude or passive aggressive or nasty, your best defense is to ignore them. Because trying to respond to that, giving any energy to that, actually could just build up drama in a situation that doesn't require it. And it just exacerbates somebody else behaving badly, and now they're making you behave badly, and it's not necessary. Now, and let me add to that before I move on. We're going to run into people who are mean, who are thoughtless, who are selfish, who are just passive aggressive, rude, jealous, you name it. We're going to run into them all the time. There are always people in the work environment with these traits who just say nasty things, and you are better off to just walk away and ignore it. Now, when is it bullying, and when does it matter for you to actually have a response? So there isn't like a worldwide singular definition of bullying, but I have noticed in all the definitions of bullying, there are three kind of common components to when a situation is not just somebody being a jerk, but somebody actually being a bully. And I'm going to pause and say, hey, Jill. So completely aside from the bully comments, it's good to see you, Jill. I didn't want to ignore your comment there, and happy Halloween to you. All right, so when is it bullying? The three components that make up bullying. Usually, there's an imbalance of power. All right, so usually bullies use their power to help, not to help, bullies use their power to control, push, harm other people. So it's interesting in the dynamic that you mentioned, for example, Anna, is that being bullied by your team. If you're being bullied by people reporting to you, it means there's a perception on their part that they can do it to you. There's an imbalance of power that suggests that if they behave badly, you're just going to roll over anyway, and that's why they do it. So imbalance of power. Most bullies, and the statistic is, I have it, the statistic is, I was going to try to memorize it, but I have the number, 61%. 61% of bullies in the workplace are the bosses. So they're abusing their power, right, to harm or control other people. But that's only one component of bullying. This could just be power and people being rude. Second is the intent. The intent behind the nasty comment, the nasty action, the whatever they've done. The intent is to cause disruption, damage, some kind of harm. So there's an imbalance of power, whether it's perceived or organizational. Like, it doesn't have to be, the bully doesn't have to be above you in the org chart, right? As Anna pointed out, it can come from your team, but the perception is there's an imbalance of power. There's an intent to cause some sort of damage or disruption by the bully. They have a goal to cause disruption and harm. And three, it's repetitive. the incidence of the bullying happens to the same person over and over. It happens to the same group over and over. So within the definition of bullying, the three core elements are imbalance of power, intent to cause some sort of disruption or damage, and repetition. It happens repeatedly. If you've got those three elements, you have a situation of bullying on your hands. If it does not, it doesn't mean you don't have bullying, but it could just mean you have people behaving badly and being jerks. And I think there is room for us to recognize we are never going to be in a workplace, because we are never going to be in a society where everybody is nice to each other. It would be nice, but it's not reality. That's not human nature. So there comes a point where we have to recognize these are people being jerks, and I am going to let that be. So when you walk away from bullying, you're walking away from it because the person who's the bully doesn't directly impact your livelihood, doesn't directly cause damage or harm to you getting your work done. Therefore, ignore the bully. If they can't truly cause damage or harm to your ability to do your job and do your job effectively, then all their bullying shenanigans don't matter. They're irrelevant. And it's so easy for us to be reactive and get caught up in the drama because we're mad. They said something rude. They were disrespectful. They were unprofessional. We want to respond. We want to respond. We want to defend ourselves. We want to defend our reputation. We want to defend our team. But sometimes being that reactive causes more drama and more chaos and more distraction and more disruption than it does good. Because I can guarantee you 100% of the time, when you try to school a bully into better behavior, you will fail. Bullies do not learn better behavior, being nicer people, being better people, having integrity. They don't learn that from one lesson from somebody who knows better. They don't. It is a long-standing pattern with bullies. I was going to give you a few stats on the bullying piece. I mentioned the 61% of workplace bullies are bosses. Over 60 million Americans, so we'll talk about North America, right? Over 60 million Americans are affected by workplace bullying. That's a lot. Over 50% of employees who report that they've been bullied at work. So over 50% of those who report it, and there are so many more of you who don't report it, but over 50% of you who do report it also report that it has a negative impact on your mental health, which is really what it's designed to do. So yay, they win. 57% of bullies in the workplace are men, 33% are women. And as you heard me say earlier in the training I have on Queen Bees, women bullying women, while more bullies are men, women bully women more often than men bully women, which is a horrible statistic. Workplace bullying costs the American business between 250 and 360. So we're just going to average $300 billion annually is wasted in productivity due to bullying. Because when you are in a work environment where you are feeling bullied, what happens? You're distracted, you can't get your job done, you're caught up in drama, you're telling stories with other people, you're gossiping with other people, you're reporting to HR, you're documenting, whatever it is you're doing, it is wasted because you are not doing your job. $300 billion a year in lost productivity directly related to bullying. People of color are bullied 50% more often than their white counterparts. That's just a disgusting metric. Right? That is just a revolting metric that in this day and age that still happens. And over 60% of employees who experience workplace bullying consider changing jobs. I'm surprised that number isn't higher. And I will tell you right now, that is one of your very viable options if you are in a workplace that tolerates bullying, and we will talk about that. So as a reminder, bullies have certain characteristics, In the last 2 weeks, we talked about 10 different profiles of types of bullies you run into in the workplace and how to deal with them. And so we know in general with all those profiles, they lack empathy. They do not have a big crew of friends around them because they're not particularly likable. They have a need, right? They have a drive, most of them, around power and control. They feel empowered when they're creating conflict, when they're making other people feel small or threatened. Most of them suffer from some form of low self-esteem. That's why they fall into this pattern. They may have been bullied themselves. They may be trauma survivors. Those are not excuses. Those just feed into the pattern. Remember, bullying is a pattern. If somebody is a bully, it is a way of being. If they are bullying you at work, you are not the only one. And if they are a bully at work, they are a bully at home. It is a pattern of being. And that's why I'm saying your one-time confrontation isn't going to school them into better behavior. We're not going to fix that problem. Now, if you missed the last 2 weeks of trainings where we went through the 10 profiles and you want to see those and learn more about each of the individual profiles, drop the word profiles in the replay. Profiles in the chat, and I will send you the replay. Let me get my English right. It's been a long day. But if you'd like, there were 10 profiles I covered of types of workplace bullies and how to deal with them. So drop the word profiles in the chat and I will send you those replays. Okay. I want to get to your questions because you guys asked some great questions. Let me see here. Where did they go? Questions. Okay, questions. What are the warning signs that you are possibly dealing with a bully? So here's the deal. You cannot have direct double negatives. You cannot have direct. Okay. You don't have to be the victim of a bully to recognize that there's a bully in the room. Let me put it that way. You don't have to be the target in order to go, oh, that person is a bully and a jerk. You don't even have to watch them aggressively attacking someone else to recognize that, although that is your obvious clue. So how do you know you're dealing with a bully? Remember, I went through those characteristics, right? They lack empathy. They like to have power and control. And as we talked about with some of those profiles, some of them can be very manipulative and charming. So you might not right off the bat recognize this is a person who has a tendency to bully. So what do you look for? If you have somebody who consistently disrespects authority, disregards the rules, they may have a tendency to be a bully. If you have someone who has an attitude of superiority, they think they're smarter than everybody else, they think they know more than everybody else. Someone who is quick to blame other people. It's never their fault, they're never accountable. Well, that wouldn't have, my mistake wouldn't have happened if you hadn't made your mistake first, right? They're never directly accountable for their outcomes. Like I said, they need to have that control or that power over other people. And somebody who enjoys putting someone else down. Someone who enjoys demeaning other people, especially publicly. Maybe any one of those individual things does not make a bully, but if you have some combination of those characteristics, those 5, you've probably got a bully on your hands. And I'll give you a great example. Someone I currently work with who is definitely a bully. His most common mode of bullying behavior is we have regular meetings where we look at our metrics of how we're performing. And we have agreed upon company-wide, we have agreed that there are certain dashboards that measure our KPIs, our key performance indicators, that we are going to look at every week. And this is where we go and figure out how are we doing, where do we need to improve, blah, blah, blah. So he comes to these meetings where we all sit down and we're looking at the dashboards, and he has his own dashboards. He has his own data that he's pulled, sometimes from the same source, sometimes different data sources, but he sliced the data a different way, he looked at it a different way. So he comes into these meetings with a whole different story about why everyone else is failing and he's performing well based on numbers that he's handpicked out of the set of numbers that we've already agreed upon. Outside of the set of numbers we've already agreed upon are these are the numbers the company follows. And even though he has been told multiple times, you are not allowed to create your own spreadsheets, you are not allowed to create your own data and just throw it into the meeting, he does. Right? So that is a consistent disrespect for authority and disregarding the rules to get his own way, to get his own story told. And he is consistently throwing that at everybody else. And what that does is it creates a distraction, because now everybody looks around and goes, well, wait a minute, are these numbers right or are those numbers right? Do we have to argue against those numbers? Because those numbers that he's looking at tell me I'm doing a terrible job, but these numbers I'm looking at say we're doing a pretty good job. Now I have to defend myself against numbers that are not company sanctioned numbers. It is a form of bullying. So keep an eye out for those traits. Even if it's not directed at you, you can start identifying that person, those personalities that are kind of leaning towards bullying, or definitely have that propensity. The second question I got, how do I mitigate bullying? It's what we'd all like to solve. How do we just avoid it in the first place? How do we stop this behavior from happening? So first of all, I'm going to go back to the training I announced at the beginning where I said drop the word deal in the chat if you would like that training, where I do spend quite a bit of time talking about different ways we can mitigate bullying. How do we deal with bullying in the office place? For this training, I wanted to point to, there are just some key things you have to remember if you're dealing with a bully in the office. And first and foremost, go back to what I said earlier. If it doesn't impact your livelihood, if it doesn't impact your job and your ability to do your job, walk away from it. There's no good that comes from getting yourself embroiled in any sort of conflict with a bully unless there is a direct impact on your ability to do your job, which then impacts your mental health, your emotional health, and sometimes your physical health. So keep that in mind. Now, if you're in this environment where it's like, I have to, person is my boss. This person is the coworker that I partner with everything on, right? This is disruptive to my ability to perform my job and perform it well. Then first and foremost, mitigating bullying. Your well-being and your safety comes first. First and foremost is your well-being and your safety. So do what you need to do to protect that. Which means if you're in a physical office and you need to create a physical space, do it. Right? Don't go into the break room or the coffee room if that person is in there. You wait till they leave. Do not increase your amount of physical contact with them any more than necessary. Not because they're going to push you down the stairs, but simply because when you're dealing with a bully, and you know this as well as I do, the minute you're in their orbit, what happens? You tense up. You tense up. You get shallow breath. You get stressed. Because you're wondering what attack is going to happen. What's this person going to say that's going to derail me now? What is this person going to do that's going to upset me today? When we know that we're in an environment with a bully, we go in armored. And that increases our cortisol levels, which increases our stress levels, which means we get more headaches, we get sick more often, we feel depressed, we feel anxious. So if you can create the physical distance, create the physical distance. You also want to create emotional and mental distance, which means breathe. Every time I go into a meeting with this person who brings in their own stats, before the meeting, I take 2 minutes to just breathe deep and ground myself. Because my strength and your strength when we are in a situation where there is a bully who is attacking us is to stay grounded and calm and not react. Because here's the deal. Oftentimes they're attacking us with distractions. They don't have all the information or all the facts. They're looking at it through their certain lens, right? They're picking at us. Everyone else in the room knows what's going on. Everyone else in the room can see this person is being a bully. If you engage with the bully, you end up escalating the situation, and it can blow up, and then there's more drama, and then there's more time wasted, and there's more distractedness. You don't need to be putting your precious energy towards that. They don't deserve that. So that's one, is you want to stay as detached and calm as possible. Literally breathe, because one of the things that happens when we get stressed and we get tense and we hold our breath, right? When our body goes into that mode, so does our brain. We get tunnel vision. And suddenly, the person is attacking you, but you're already so stressed, you can't think about how to respond appropriately. And either you shut down or you blow up. And then what happens? What happens is 2 hours later, when you're retelling the story to your partner and you're all agitated over what happened, you think of the perfect thing you should have said, right? This is why stress is why it's always an hour later or 2 hours later that we suddenly think of all the witty comebacks we should have said. We think of all the ways we could have responded more intelligently. But in the moment we couldn't, because we weren't breathing and we caught our breath and our body went into stress mode and our brain shut down into tunnel vision and we couldn't think of all the things that we could have and should have said. We aren't capable of it. So the more that you can practice regulating, breathing deep, staying grounded, staying focused, then the more you can also practice trusting yourself. So let them attack you. So let them throw their lobs at you. Like I said, everyone in the room knows they're a bully. If you can stay detached and not get hooked by the drama they're trying to stir up, not get hooked by the attack so that you feel like you have to defend and to not get emotionally reactive, if you can hold that place for yourself, you hold the power. You hold the power. Very few times do bullies throw things out there in their bullying attitude that need to be responded to immediately. It's very rare. Most of the time, they're throwing things out there to get a reaction out of you, to blow up the conversation, to take it in another direction, or to deflect so that they don't get blamed for something. If you engage, you're playing that game and you're helping them out. So you can practice detachment by simply saying a few simple things. Like with this person who brings in his own data to the meetings, if he's throwing something at me that's well, my numbers show this, and I'm going, oh my gosh, his numbers, they make me look terrible, but my numbers look good. What do I do? My response isn't to argue against his numbers. My response is, that is not the data I have. I would need to look through your data, and then I could give you a more intelligent response. The data I have in front of me says this. And this, by the way, is the data we agreed to look at for our metrics. You can say to somebody who's lobbying an accusation at you and you don't have a good answer for, who's telling you something's your fault and you don't understand the situation that they're throwing at you. You can simply say, I hear what you're saying, but I don't have the information around that, so I will look into it and I will get back to you. We're always afraid that if we don't respond in that moment and we don't sound super smart and have all the answers, that somehow people will think we're stupid. But what's actually happening if you respond in that moment and you get all defensive is you look defensive. And if we look defensive, we look like we have something to defend, which puts the bully in the position of being right. Oh, well, look at the way she responded. Look at the way she's defending her team and making all these excuses, so he must be right. You don't want to give them anything. The less you engage with the bully, the better. If you're in a situation where you have to respond because your boss tells you you have to, because a decision cannot be made in that moment, you cannot move forward without addressing it. Those are the only two reasons I can think of why you would ever deal with a bully in the moment. The decision or forward motion cannot happen until you address that point, or your boss simply puts you on the spot and says you have to address this. Then, if you cannot think of your very smart, credible response because you are in your stress mode, your best response is, I need to look into this and I will get back to you. You can pressure me into a response right now, but I don't have the information. So I can't give you a thoughtful, considered, intelligent response. It really is that simple. We hate to do it. We're not practiced at it, but that is one of the biggest tools in your toolkit. Get comfortable with that. Breathe, get detached, and practice not engaging with the bully. Now, if you're in a moment where you do need to say something to the bully, then like I said, there are those phrases I used, but here's the thing. You need to utter it with the utmost confidence. You need to say it clearly, assertively. You need to be professional and firm. And remember, this is about holding your boundaries and protecting you. I said your well-being comes first, so this is about protecting you. So if you're going to say something to the bully because they're throwing something at you and you have to respond, you stand there or you sit there and you square your shoulders and you take a deep breath and you say, I hear what you're saying. That is not the information I have in front of me. Therefore, here's what I can tell you. You can also refute them in a bit. Hold on. If the bullying behavior, for example, pardon me, is something like them raising their voice and yelling, right? Getting to a loud place. You can simply say, I hear you, but I'm not comfortable with the tone or the volume of this conversation. If we can't both speak calmly, we need to stop and re-engage later. You can say, it's not okay for you to talk to me this way. You can absolutely say that, but if you're going to do that, if you're going to put the confrontation out there, stay grounded, stay calm, be assertive. We're not attacking. We're holding a boundary. We're not attacking and we're not defending. We are holding a boundary. And holding boundaries are 85%, I'm totally making this up, 85% attitude and 15% the words you use. Because remember, when we're holding a boundary in any situation, because your mother-in-law overstepped in her criticism of how you raise your kids, because your sister keeps, coming over uninvited, whatever the situation is, holding a boundary is not about attacking them. It's not about telling them what they did wrong. It's not about correcting them. It is about, this is not acceptable to me. You are protecting your well-being in this situation. Therefore, this is not acceptable to me. We can re-engage later. The other thing you need to do when you are confronting a bully is you need to document it. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for you to write it down. Exactly what happened with the date and time that it happened. If you do nothing else, write it down and save it to a file. Because if it's a bully, it will happen again. Some sort of altercation will happen again, and you will need to write it down and add it to your file. Now, what I strongly recommend, is that you make human resources your ally. In bullying situations that I have dealt with, I have typically started with the documentation. This is the incident that happened. This is when it happened. This is what they said. This is what I said. Here's the synopsis. And I save it. I'm going to say almost 100% of the time, what I will do is then go to my HR person and say, I am documenting this conversation with you. I don't need you to do anything about it. I don't want you involved right now. I need you to know it happened because I suspect this behavior will happen again, in which case I will document it again. And what you're giving HR or your boss or your boss's boss, right? What you're giving somebody else, the key is give it to a third party that you trust and ideally who has some position of authority. Because when it happens a second time and a third time, at that point, you're going to want to look for intervention. If it happens just once and it walks away, you don't necessarily have a bully if somebody behaving really badly. If it is a repeated behavior, remember I talked about the 3 pieces of being a bully? Repetition is one of them. You want to document it so you can show, I'm not being oversensitive, I'm not making this up. Here are 3 instances in the last 6 weeks where I've had to deal with this unpleasant interaction instigated by this person. Now, the reason for documenting and the reason for sharing is because, especially sharing with HR, is because you are not the only victim. As I said earlier, bullies, it's a behavior pattern. They're not just doing it to you. If you're documenting it and sharing it with HR, and someone else on another team is documenting it and sharing it with HR, at some point HR is looking at a pattern that is documented going, we have to fix this. And now it's not you versus the bully. It is the company taking care of a problem. So you set yourself up and you set the company up for success in that situation when you follow the steps and take care of it. So document, document, document. Find a trusted resource. I'm hoping for you, you can find someone in HR, but if it's not, go to a leader, some leader in the company where you can simply share the information. And like I said, you can say the first time, I'm not asking you to do anything right now, but boy, when you do, you'll be ready. So that was the 3 steps I was talking to there in the long way. Mitigating. Your safety comes first, so set yourself up for success. Breathe, protect yourself, and hold your boundary. If you're going to say something to the bully, that's 2. Say it assertively, clearly, not defensively, and not aggressively. It is saying something is how you hold your boundary, and document it. And 3 is when you document it, share it with someone else. You want a witness to the repeated behavior. Those are the 3 core steps. I don't care what type of bully you're dealing with. I don't care what type of situation. Those are critical. 4, the bonus tip, be prepared to look to work somewhere else. Be prepared to say, I've done everything I could. I've had the conversation with the bully. I've documented the incidents. Nothing is still happening. This is an environment that supports the toxicity. I'm out of here. And it might take you a while to find an environment that is not, I was going to say full of bullies. Environments are not usually full of bullies. There's usually 1 or 2 bad eggs, but it does create toxicity for everybody. It may take some time for you to find an environment that's a good fit for you. And so the last thing I want to leave you with was question number 3, which was, how do I avoid a bully in the future jobs? How do I avoid an environment like the one I'm in? I'm not saying the one I'm in now. I'm saying, for example, if you are talking to me saying, I'm in a toxic work environment, they support the bullies, I can't get any help, how do I avoid working in a place like this in the future? I want to give you some questions to ask. Nobody's going to come right out and say, oh, this person's a bully, you don't want to work here. Right? The whole point of the interview process is to sell you on the job and to sell you on the people at the job. You can ask some questions that will give you some hints and some indicators about the environment. It'll give you clues. And between the clues you get and trusting your instinct, I think you're in good shape. And the first and most obvious question to ask, so to answer question number 4, or 3, how do I avoid being in an environment with a bully at a future job? First question I would ask, and I would ask this of anybody and everybody that you get to interview with, is tell me about the manager I'm reporting to. What's it like working for this person? So let's just say the manager is my favorite person, it's Kevin. So I would say to the HR person, but I would also say to anybody else I'm interviewing with, so what's it like to work for Kevin? What's it like being part of his team? Because if you get the response of, oh my God, Kevin is the coolest guy, he's so easy to work for, he's so helpful, he's a great mentor, blah, 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 and you get it like that, you're dealing with a pretty genuine reaction, and that's a good thing. If you say, so I'm wondering, I'm really curious, so what's it like working for Kevin? What's it like being part of his team? And you get okay, well, yeah, Kevin's a good guy. He's a good guy, and he's been here a really long time. Is Kevin a good guy? If you don't get that direct kind of enthusiastic answer and they can rattle off the why they like working for Kevin, then Kevin's got a problem. So first and most important question you can ask is literally just ask other people. Second question you can ask, how would you describe this company culture, and how does your company or organization participate in and support this culture? What's your part in this? If they can't tell you about their culture, if they're not a company that's conscious and actively saying, we're trying to create a really fun work environment where people have work-life balance and they get to bring their dogs in the office, and We foster open communication and blah, blah, blah. If they can't really talk about that and you can see that they're genuinely like, we feel like this is where we work, you may have a more closed in office, right? That allows a few people to control and direct a few things. Similar question, and you can ask both questions or you can ask just one of them, is what are the company values? And how do you guys work those values? How do you live those values every day through work? How does that show up for you? And what does the company do to support that? And your response should be something like, oh, our core values are these 5 things. It's empowerment, it's passion, it's innovation, it's curiosity, it's, these things. And here's how we live it on our team, and here's what we do, right? Here are the things we do to showcase that these values are important. And, we really believe in corporate responsibility. So we go do charity work as a team twice a year. And we also really value innovation. So we make sure that we host an internal innovation jam, once a year that everybody gets to participate in, even if they're not in tech, right? Things like this. If they can't talk to that, then you have to wonder what is being fostered in that environment, and again, who directs it, who controls it. The last question you could ask, and I love this question because it just gives you insight into what drives the company and what matters to them and who gets support. And that question is, I would love to learn more about who are the rock stars at this company? If you had to name for me 2 or 3 people who are just your shining stars in this company, not just on my team or the team I'm, interviewing with, but across the company, 2 or 3 people who really are the shining stars here, who are they? Why do you want to know that? You want to know who the company celebrates and why. Because what if the company celebrates, number 1 rock star in this company is Tom because Tom kills it at sales and he overachieves quote every year. He's always in the president's club, blah, blah, blah. You know that we have a company that's sales driven and that the sales organization is going to get the most attention and the most support in this organization. If you have somebody who says, it's Eugene. Eugene is one of our top rock stars. He runs the engineering team and we have the coolest tech and he launches those innovation days I talked about. Well, now you have probably a product and a tech driven company. That's the group that's going to get the most support and the most attention. If they say, it's totally Martha. Martha's it because Martha managed to scrape through the last quarter and save 15% on all of our expenses, which increased our profit margin. Martha is the absolute hero. She exemplifies what matters in this company. Well, now you know of a company that pays a lot of attention to finance and is probably a little tight with their pennies. So that question doesn't necessarily point to bullies, but it does point to what the company values and where they put attention and support, and which teams are going to get the most support when something goes wrong. It's just great information to have when you're trying to figure out what is this corporate environment like, and am I going to be safe here? Am I going to find my home here? Those were the 3 questions I got. I don't see any questions popping up in the chat, so I don't know if you guys have any more questions. I also know that the last couple of times that we've done this, my chat froze and I wasn't able to see all the comments. But if you have more questions, ask them now. Feel free also to ask them afterwards in the comments. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you have more questions. If there are other topics around office politics and bullying that you would like to cover or have me go through, I am completely open to that. So just as a reminder, I want to, as I said at the beginning of this, I think, unless you guys tell me otherwise, that this will be our last topic in the Playing Nice in the Sandbox series. So we've covered office politics in general. We've covered 10 different profiles of types of people you find playing office politics. And tonight in particular, we covered the bullies. If you are interested in the overall training I did last year around how to deal with bullies, and I talk about different types of bullying situations and how to deal with those specifically, drop the word deal in the comments and I will send you that training. If you would like the training that is specific to women, women who bully women, I call them queen bees. Drop the word bees. I wasn't gonna. I'm not was. I want to say queen, but they're not queens. They're bad queens. So I want to. So bees. Drop the word bees in the comment, and I will send you that training. And I think the third training I offered you was the profiles. If you missed the last 2 weeks of the office politics profiles, drop the word profiles in the comments, and I'm more than happy to send you those 2 trainings as well. But otherwise, that wraps it up for tonight. I want to thank you guys for sticking with me through the series, for sending in your questions and letting me address those specifically so that I can make sure we're covering the topics that are interesting to you and that are most helpful to you. I'm going to look at doing more of that in the future, actually, and seeing how much more I can just get your specific questions and interactivity on some topics so that we're supporting you as best as we can. So thank you for joining me tonight for Training Tuesday. I see that we've got some requests in the chat. I will be sure to get those trainings out to you over the next day or two so that you have a chance to look at them. And again, if you have further questions or think of anything else you'd like me to cover on these Training Tuesdays, whether it's related to office politics or not, I'm always open to your feedback and hearing about what you guys would like to cover. So have a fabulous rest of your Tuesday night. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I will see you next week.